Before you guys draw anything, make sure you have the eyes correct, and if they don't look like super accurate too and you want me to check them, that's fine. I'd be more than happy to check as you draw. All right, then the next thing is the nose. So I look for, how does the nose line up with the eyes? So if I'm looking at the side of his nose, like the nostril lines up a little bit in from the tear duct here, but on this side, it lines up in the middle of the iris. So I would kind of follow down and make a little guideline in addition to looking at how the nose passes through the grid. I also look at the fact that we know you have nostril openings. We know you have holes for your nostrils, but depending on the shape of your nostrils, the tilt of your head, etc., you might not be able to see them. So notice his is just a line where the nostrils are. And okay, looking at Charlotte, hers is still just a line over here, and then I can see a little bit of the opening or shadow. All right, here's her nostrils. So then I would take a look at the nostrils and ask yourself, are they round, triangular, kind of like Larissa's a little bit, like they kind of peek up a little bit, oval shaped, are they slanted? Sometimes they look like teardrops. So look at the actual shape of the opening and don't just put a circle for a hole because you know a hole is there. Like that's a left brain thing. Like actually look at it and decide like what is the shape of that opening. All right, so then for noses, on this side, because his head is slightly tilted away from the camera, and it's really the edge of the glasses that helps create that. So I do have a line to draw, and over here, I'm not going to draw like that shadow part, but then I have a line to draw here. When I'm drawing the nose, I kind of look at, does the tip of the nose come down lower than the nostrils? So his happens to come lower than the nostrils. Hers dips down slightly, and it's like more squared off on the edge. For this one, the nostrils are a little bit lower than the tip of the nose. So I'm looking at like, where's the tip of the nose in accordance to the nostrils? So things to notice before you start. All right, then when you're ready, then you're gonna draw super lightly. And if you're facing more forward, so for instance, for Larissa's nose, there's not a whole lot there to draw. Let me flip this down so it's easier to see. Really, it's like the side of the nostrils and then this part. And I probably give myself a guideline for this shadow, how it connects to the eyebrow. I would just give myself a guideline. And if this were my drawing, I would have value mapped this shadow from the eye and value map that shadow too. So when you're working with eyes, start value mapping. Same thing with noses. So we're starting that process. Like for instance, Charlotte has a cast shadow from her nose. So while I have the grid on there, I would definitely outline it and then look more closely in the inside of the shadow to draw. He doesn't have a cast shadow, but he definitely does have like an indentation because he's stretching his face that I would give myself a guideline. And then while I'm drawing mouth and nose, I would then draw any creases, like smile lines, etc., because that's what makes your cheeks look like they're being moved slightly. All right, so the first thing I would do is line up with the eyes and give yourself guidelines for the sides of the nostrils. So right now, get your picture out. Even if you're only have one eye, you could do it on one side. If your eyes aren't done, then you're just watching. All right, so I'm going to give myself a guideline. It's like halfway, above half of halfway in 6D. Okay, then I'm going to do the other side, other nostril. Okay, then I'm going to double check. That nostril lines up a little bit in from the tear duct and middle of iris. Middle of iris, a little bit side of the tear duct. So I'm double checking my little guidelines. Okay, then for the tip of the nose, I would give myself a little guideline for how far down does the tip of the nose go. It's like half of halfway in box E6. So halfway, half of halfway, over here, and it's halfway, half like here. Okay. All right, so from there, sometimes it is easier to just use those guidelines and flip up your grid to draw from, especially like his nose. There's not a whole lot of detail. So if the grid is confusing to you, use it for guidelines and then just like flip it up to look more closely. So I am going to look at how, with his glasses, I see a little bit of the side of his nose on this side. I am going to put in that shadow that the glasses creates. Okay. Looking at this side, I'm looking at how it slightly indents, like right where that line is. Okay. But then I'm going to flip up my grid and I'm going to check this line for line quality. So I feel like it needs to indent a little bit higher. All right, then I would look at, like, does the nostril line then connect into your nostril? And so for his is just a line that indicates the nostril. But for some of you, the nostril outline then meets in with the opening or the hole. Okay, so looking at how far over his nose comes, and then I'm looking at how the tip of the nose turns into the shadow part. So, and there's a little bit of a shadow on the edge. So I'm going to put that in there to remind myself when I'm shading, like these shadows kind of connect. All right, then and your noses will look big because they're all shading. It's all value. Like I would need to put in, I have like the core shadow here, there's shadow here. I mean, this side's slightly darker, especially if I were to draw Charlotte's, it would look really big, but like half of it is in shadow. So that's gonna make it look smaller. So as long as it lines up with your eyes how it should, don't make adjustments. Your noses will look big, your mouths will look big until you put value on them. Your face will look big until you put value on it. Okay, so then for lips, the next thing I'm going to do is put a little line in each corner. This is easier with a closed mouth. I put a little dot in each corner of the mouth, and then make sure it's parallel with the eyes. So you're making sure everything is slanting the same. So I would do corner, a dot, and give myself a little guideline like we did for the eyes, and then make all of your guidelines according to the grid. So his is a little bit different because it's an open mouth, but some of you have an open mouth, so it's good to demonstrate on. All right, so corner. So right now if you have, and you can make your guidelines, you might have to fix them, but you can make your guidelines if you are ready for that. Oh my God, turn the door handle. Can you answer that, Elise? Like, turn the knob.
Jordan said you have 3 months for the acrylic thing.
Yeah, I'm busy right now. Tell him.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so corner to corner, oh, sorry. So I'm putting a little guideline where the corner of his mouth is, like right here. All right, then making another little guideline where the other corner of the mouth is. And then I would double check that according to the eyes. So I'm looking at, okay, corner of the mouth lines up pretty much the middle of the iris on this side. And it pretty much lines up with this grid line. All right, over here lines up with the edge of the nostril and like the edge of the iris. So that's what I would double check. Okay, so it ends up with the edge of the nostril, edge of the iris. Okay, this one over here, middle of the iris. So double check your guidelines, and then I would do a guideline for where the Cupid's bow is on the upper lips, and I would do a guideline for the biggest part of the curve in the bottom lip. And then I would do the line that goes between the lips or the opening of your mouth. So once I had guidelines for the width, I would do a guideline for like where it dips in the Cupid's bow, a little guideline for the center curve, and then I would actually draw this line, like with my viewfinder. All right, so I'm gonna do top. Bottom curve, like where does it curve the most? All right, then I would give myself little guidelines for how the lips flow through the grid lines. Like how close are they? Like this one pretty much touches. So just like the eyes, you're going to want to give yourself a lot of little guidelines. Okay, so that helps me with the opening. So then I would do the contour outlines of the opening, and sometimes once you have all of your guidelines on there, then it's easier to just look at quality of line by flipping up your grid. Especially if like the curvature of your lips hit a grid line. Then I would do guidelines for the line in between your lips, or for an open mouth, you're going to have to do guidelines for where the bottom of each lip is. And I also look for where do the thickness of the lips just kind of sink into a line. Like where did the lip part disappear? Or where does the lip part disappear? Okay, so for him, since his teeth overlap his mouth right there, then I'm going to kind of pencil in the teeth in order to finish the lips in this corner. just because it like covers up some of it. But so I'd really look for how your lips kind of like, you can see lip and then it like just sinks into the line. Like where does it flow into the line? So for instance, her lip line, or I'm sorry, the parting between the lips comes way over because she's smiling a little bit. So that's what I'd look for lining up with the eyes. Then I look for where does the lip kind of just sink into that line about here. What does that line up with? Like this part of the nose. So once you have your nose on, then you can use it for additional guidelines. All right, so lots of little guidelines with your viewfinder. And then for line quality, if it's hard to see, flip up your grid and use your guidelines.